The rescue doctor Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold viewport of the research vessel Endeavour, watching distant stars wheel slowly past as her ship drifted helplessly through the void. The silence was absolute except for her own breathing, and the occasional groan of stressed metal as the hull cooled. 3 days ago, she had been conducting routine xenobiological surveys in the Outer Rim territories. Now she was stranded in an uncharted system with failing life support and no hope of rescue. The cascade failure had started in the quantum drive core during what should have been a simple jump to the next survey point. One moment she was reviewing her notes on extremophiles organisms found on Deadworlders, and the next moment every system on the ship was screaming warnings. As exotic matter containment failed catastrophically, Sarah had barely managed to seal herself into the emergency pod before the drive section tore itself apart in a brilliant flash of uncontrolled energy. Her emergency beacon was broadcasting, but the nearest human outpost was 6 months away at conventional speeds. The pod's life support would last perhaps 2 weeks if she was extremely careful with power consumption. Sarah had already resigned herself to becoming another casualty of humanity's ambitious push into the unknown regions of space. At 32 years old, she had dedicated her life to understanding alien life forms, never imagining she would die alone among the stars without ever finding what she was looking for. The first sign that she was not as alone as she thought came as a gentle vibration through the pod's hull. Sarah's instruments detected something massive approaching, but the energy signatures were unlike anything in human databases. Whatever was out there moved with purpose and intelligence, its presence causing her equipment to register readings. That should have been impossible according to known physics. When the ship finally came into visual range, Sarah could only stare in amazement. The vessel was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest human battleship, but it moved through space with an organic grace that defied understanding. Its hull appeared to be grown rather than built, with flowing curves and surfaces that shifted color like a living thing. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its length in rhythms that suggested communication, or perhaps even thought processes. A beam of soft golden light enveloped her pod, and Sarah felt the sensation of being gently drawn toward an opening that appeared in the alien vessel's side. Her instruments detected a breathable atmosphere being established around her pod even before she was brought inside. What could only be described as a vast garden chamber. Trees and flowering plants from dozens of different worlds created a paradise of color and fragrance that seemed impossible to exist in the depths of space. The beings who emerged to greet her challenged every assumption Sarah had made about life in the universe. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, with graceful, elongated limbs and skin that had an almost translucent quality. Beneath the surface, gentle patterns of light flowed like slow rivers of starlight. Their faces were hauntingly beautiful, with large dark eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages and the compassion of beings who had never known hatred or violence. One of them approached her with movements that suggested complete harmony with their environment. When it spoke, the words formed directly in her mind with crystalline clarity, bypassing her ears entirely. "Welcome, child of distant stars. I am Healer Zephyra of the Kythera. We sensed your distress and could not leave a sentient being to perish in the cold emptiness. You are safe now." Sarah tried to respond but found her throat tight with emotion and wonder. The being seemed to understand her distress and gestured toward a device on the chamber wall that began emanating a soft, calming frequency. Within moments, Sarah felt her panic and disorientation fading, replaced by a profound sense of peace and safety she had never experienced before. Over the following days, as the Kythera vessel traveled toward the nearest human shipping lane, Sarah learned about her rescuers. The Kythera were an ancient species, possibly one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. They had spent millions of years exploring the cosmos, but unlike most species, their journeys were motivated by curiosity and the desire to preserve and nurture life rather than conquest or expansion. Their entire culture was built around a fundamental principle that all consciousness was precious, and that advanced beings had a moral obligation to protect and help those who were struggling. They had intervened in countless situations across the galaxy, saving dying species, preventing extinctions, and sharing knowledge with younger civilizations. They asked for nothing in return except that those they helped remember the debt, and perhaps one day extend the same kindness to others. Zephyra showed Sarah wonders that human science could barely comprehend. They walked through vast chambers, where the ship itself seemed alive, its walls pulsing gently with their own heartbeat. Plants and animals from hundreds of different worlds lived in perfect harmony, creating ecosystems that existed nowhere else in the universe. The Kythera had become gardeners of life itself, collecting and preserving species that might otherwise be lost to time and disaster. "We have watched your species for some time," explained Elder Morvain when Sarah was brought before the ship's governing council. The chamber was a marvel of living architecture, with walls that displayed the swirling patterns of distant nebulae and floors that felt warm and alive beneath her feet. "Humanity shows remarkable potential despite your youth and tendency toward conflict. You possess something rare in the galaxy, the ability to adapt, to grow beyond your origins, and to care for those unlike yourselves." The elder's mental voice carried overtones of both sadness and hope. "We saved you not because we expected gratitude or reward, but because preserving life is what gives our existence meaning. Your species may be young and sometimes violent, but you have already shown remarkable capacity for growth and compassion. Perhaps one day you will understand what it means to be guardians of life, rather than merely its exploiters." As they approached human space, Sarah found herself profoundly changed by the experience. The Kythera had shared not just their knowledge, but their entire philosophy of existence. She had seen what a truly advanced civilization could become when it dedicated itself to creation and preservation, rather than destruction and domination. The gentle beings had healed not just her physical injuries, but something deeper in her soul that she had not even realized was wounded. When they finally reached the shipping lanes where human vessels could detect her emergency beacon, Zephyra accompanied Sarah to the airlock for their farewell. The Kythera's luminous skin pulsed with patterns that Sarah had learned indicated deep emotion and connection. "Human Sarah Chen," Zephyra said, her mental voice filled with warmth and affection. "Remember this time we have shared. Remember that, when your species was lost and vulnerable in the darkness, the Kythera offered aid without thought of reward. We ask nothing of you or your people, but the universe has its own way of balancing acts of kindness. Perhaps there will come a day when we too are in need, and the memory of this debt will guide your species' actions." Sarah returned to Earth forever transformed by her encounter with true benevolence. Her debriefing sessions with the Department of Interstellar Affairs lasted for months as she shared every detail of Kythera technology, culture, and philosophy. She insisted that their rescue of her be officially recorded in Earth's diplomatic archives, arguing that such an act of selfless kindness deserved to be remembered and honored. The scientific community was fascinated by her descriptions of Kythera, biotechnology, and their approach to preserving life across the galaxy. Sarah published dozens of papers on what she had learned, but she always emphasized that the most important lesson was not about their advanced science, but about their fundamental commitment to helping others without expectation of reward. Years passed, and Sarah rose through the ranks of Earth's growing diplomatic corps. She specialized in first contact protocols and interspecies relations, always carrying with her the memory of gentle beings who had saved her life simply because it was the right thing to do. She often wondered what had become of Zephyra and the other Kythera, hoping they continued their mission of preserving and protecting life throughout the galaxy. Sarah never forgot the debt humanity owed to the Kythera, and she made certain that future generations would remember it as well. In her lectures at the Academy, she always told the story of her rescue, emphasizing that advanced civilizations were measured not by their military might or economic power, but by their willingness to help those in need without thought of personal gain. She had no way of knowing that 20 years later, that debt would be called in and humanity would face its greatest test of character and courage among the stars. The crisis 20 years had passed since Dr. Sarah Chen's rescue, and she now sat in the prestigious position of Director of Interstellar Relations for the United Earth Government. Her office overlooked the sprawling metropolis of New Geneva, where representatives from 17 different alien species worked alongside humans in the galaxy's most ambitious diplomatic experiment. The walls were lined with artifacts and gifts from various civilizations, but pride of place was given to a small crystalline sculpture that pulsed with gentle light. A farewell gift from healer Zephyra 2 decades ago. Sarah's hair now showed streaks of silver, and her face bore the lines of someone who had spent years navigating the complex politics of an increasingly crowded galaxy. Humanity had expanded rapidly since her rescue, establishing colonies on 43 worlds and making contact with numerous alien species. Some had become allies and trading partners, while others remained cautiously neutral. A few had proven openly hostile, but none had posed an existential threat to human civilization. That changed on a Tuesday morning when her assistant burst into her office with an expression of barely controlled panic. "Director Chen, we're receiving an emergency transmission on the old Kythera diplomatic frequency. The message is badly distorted, but our computers are confirming the source." Sarah felt her blood turn to ice. In 20 years, there had been no communication from the Kythera despite humanity's attempts to locate them and establish formal diplomatic relations. They seemed to move through the galaxy like benevolent ghosts, appearing when needed and vanishing, just as mysteriously. For them to break their silence could only mean something catastrophic had occurred. The transmission, when finally cleaned up by the most advanced decryption systems on Earth, struck the diplomatic core like a physical blow. Elder Morvane's mental voice, now strained with exhaustion and despair, spoke directly to Sarah's mind through the quantum communication array. "Sarah Chen of humanity, if you remember the debt between our peoples, we desperately need your aid. The Void Hunters have found us. They seek not conquest but the complete eradication of all organic life in the galaxy. Our worlds burn, our people die, and our ancient civilization crumbles before their mechanical hatred. We have nowhere else to turn. If humanity remembers kindness, if you remember the value of life we once showed you, please help us. We are dying." The silence that followed in the communication center was deafening. Around the room, humanity's best diplomatic minds struggled to process what they had just heard. The Void Hunters were legendary even among the most ancient species. A race of artificial beings that had supposedly destroyed entire galactic sectors millions of years ago, before vanishing into deep space. Most experts had considered them a myth, a cautionary tale told by elder species about the dangers of unchecked technological advancement. Sarah's hands trembled as she activated the emergency council protocols. Within hours, Earth's most powerful leaders had assembled in the crisis management center beneath the capital. The room's holographic displays showed tactical assessments, fleet positions, and resource allocations, as humanity's leadership grappled with the implications of the Kythera's desperate plea. Admiral Marcus Torres, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, presented the sobering reality of their situation. "The strategic analysis is clear but terrifying. Based on our limited intelligence, the Void Hunters operate with technology that makes our most advanced systems look primitive. They're described as purely mechanical beings, artificial intelligences housed in virtually indestructible bodies that view organic life as a contamination to be eliminated." Defense Secretary Williams leaned forward, his expression grim. "Admiral, while we all respect the debt humanity owes the Kythera, we must consider the practical implications. These Void Hunters have supposedly destroyed civilizations that were millions of years more advanced than us. Engaging them could mean the extinction of our entire species." Sarah rose from her seat, her voice carrying the weight of 2 decades spent building bridges between species. 20 years ago, the Kythera had no obligation to save one stranded human scientist. They were pursuing their own mission of exploration and preservation when they diverted course to rescue me. They asked for nothing in return except that we remember their kindness. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Now they're facing extinction, and they've turned to the one species in the galaxy that might understand what it means to fight impossible odds. The question before us isn't whether we can win. The question is whether we can live with ourselves if we don't try." President Martinez, who had risen from junior diplomat to leader of humanity during Sarah's tenure as director, looked around the table at her advisors. "The philosophical argument is clear, but we need to understand the tactical reality. What exactly are we facing? The intelligence briefing that followed painted a picture of technological horror that challenged humanity's understanding of warfare. The Void Hunters were described as beings of pure mechanical perfection, their consciousness existing within bodies that could repair themselves from virtually any damage. They traveled in ships that seemed to bend the laws of physics, appearing without warning and devastating entire star systems before vanishing again. Their motivation was simple and terrifying. They viewed organic life as a chaotic aberration that corrupted the perfect order of the universe. Every living being, from the smallest microbe to the most advanced civilization, was marked for systematic elimination. They had emerged from whatever deep space exile they had endured with technology even more advanced than when they had first terrorized the galaxy eons ago. Dr. Elena Vasquez, head of Earth's Advanced Weapons Division, provided the only glimmer of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation. We've been analyzing the fragmentary data about Void Hunter technology, and there might be a theoretical weakness. Their perfection could be their downfall. They've evolved beyond organic unpredictability, which means they might not be prepared for truly chaotic tactics. Admiral Torres studied the tactical projections with the eye of someone who had spent decades preparing for humanity's defense against superior foes. Doctor, are you suggesting that our relative primitiveness could actually be an advantage? Vasquez nodded grimly. The Void Hunters expect logical, predictable responses from their enemies. Every species they've encountered has tried to match their technological superiority directly. But humans don't fight fair. We use whatever works, regardless of whether it's elegant or conventional. Our primitive approach to warfare might be exactly what's needed. The debate continued for hours as Earth's leadership wrestled with a decision that could determine the fate of both humanity and one of the galaxy's most benevolent species. Intelligence reports confirmed that the Kythera were indeed being systematically hunted to extinction. Their peaceful nature had left them defenseless against an enemy that viewed their very existence as an affront to cosmic order. Sarah found herself thinking about healer Zephyra and the gentle beings who had saved her life, without thought of reward. They had shown her what true compassion looked like, what it meant to value life above all else. Now they were dying, and humanity was perhaps the only species in the galaxy with both the military capability and the moral flexibility to attempt a rescue. The vote, when it finally came, was unanimous. Humanity would honor its debt, regardless of the cost. Within hours, mobilization orders went out across human space as Earth's military began preparing for the largest and most dangerous operation in human history. Every available ship was recalled from patrol duties, every reserve unit activated, and every allied species contacted for potential support. But even as the preparations began, everyone involved understood the terrible reality they faced. The Void Hunters had destroyed civilizations that had millions of years to develop their defenses. Humanity had barely 2 centuries of spaceflight experience and technology that was primitive by galactic standards. They were preparing to fight gods with slingshots, and the odds of survival were vanishingly small. Yet as Admiral Torres stood before the assembled fleet commanders during their final briefing, his words carried the weight of humanity's entire history of achieving the impossible. We're not going out there to win a conventional victory. We're going to save the species that saved one of ours, and we're going to show the galaxy that some debts are worth dying for. The response from Earth's finest military minds was immediate and unified. They understood the odds. They knew they were likely flying to their deaths, but they also knew that this was humanity's moment to prove that they deserved their place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as protectors of all life. The fleet that assembled at Luna Station was the largest armada humanity had ever fielded. 800 ships carrying the hopes and determination of an entire species toward what might be their final battle among the stars. The Stand Admiral Marcus Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching through the massive viewport as humanity's greatest fleet formed up around his flagship. 800 ships of various classes stretched into the distance, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of distant stars. Dreadnoughts, carriers, destroyers, and support vessels, All moved with choreographed precision as they prepared for a journey that would test everything humanity had learned about warfare in the hostile galaxy. At 55 years old, Torres had commanded Earth's defenses through 7 different conflicts with aggressive species, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Intelligence reports continued to paint an increasingly grim picture of the Void Hunters' capabilities. These mechanical beings operated with technology that seemed to violate known laws of physics, appearing without warning to systematically exterminate all organic life in entire star systems. "Admiral," reported Captain Lisa Park, his chief intelligence officer, "we're receiving updated coordinates from the Kythera. They've managed to establish a temporary refuge in the Helix Nebula, but long-range sensors indicate massive Void Hunter fleet movements in that direction. We estimate perhaps 72 hours before their position is overrun." Torres absorbed the information with the calm professionalism that had made him humanity's most trusted military leader. 72 hours to cross half the galaxy and engage an enemy that had destroyed civilizations millions of years more advanced than Earth. By any rational analysis, the mission was impossible. But humanity had built its entire expansion into space on achieving the impossible. The journey through folded space took 48 hours of continuous travel at maximum velocity. During the passage, every ship in the fleet conducted intensive combat drills and equipment checks. Dr. Elena Vasquez's revolutionary weapon systems were distributed throughout the Armada, kinetic bombardment weapons that used pure mass and velocity rather than energy beams that sophisticated defensive systems could deflect or absorb. "The Void Hunters expect conventional warfare," Vasquez explained during the final tactical briefing. "Energy weapons, defensive shields, and predictable battle formations. We're going to give them something they've never encountered: human warfare at its most chaotic and unpredictable." The weapons she had developed were deceptively simple: dense metal projectiles accelerated to enormous velocities by gravitic drives, at impact speeds approaching 15% of light velocity. Even small projectiles carried the destructive force of nuclear weapons. The larger planet crackers could theoretically split a dreadnought in half with a single hit. As the fleet emerged from folded space at the edge of the Helix Nebula, long-range sensors immediately detected the scope of the unfolding catastrophe. The nebula's normally beautiful gas clouds were illuminated by the fires of dying worlds, as Void Hunter ships methodically eliminated every trace of organic life they encountered. The geometric precision of their formation spoke to minds that viewed warfare as a mathematical exercise rather than an emotional struggle. "Admiral," reported Commander Chen from the sensor station, "we're detecting the Kythera refugee fleet near the nebula's core. Approximately 40 ships, mostly civilian vessels, attempting to evacuate survivors. They're surrounded by over 300 Void Hunter units." Torres studied the tactical display with growing admiration for his enemy's efficiency. The Void Hunters had positioned themselves with mathematical precision to prevent any escape while they slowly tightened their formation. They were taking their time, methodically hunting down every last survivor like exterminators dealing with an infestation. The Void Hunter ships themselves defied conventional understanding of naval architecture. They appeared to be grown rather than built, with flowing organic curves that seemed somehow wrong when housing purely artificial minds. Their hulls showed no visible weapons ports or engine exhausts, suggesting technology so advanced it might as well have been magic to human observers. "All ships," Torres commanded through the fleet communication array, "execute battle plan Chaos. Remember, we're not here to win a conventional engagement. We're here to create enough confusion and destruction to open an escape corridor for the refugees. Make every shot count, and prepare to show these machines what human desperation looks like." The human fleet attacked from 12 different vectors simultaneously, their formation exploding into apparent randomness as individual ship. Captains implemented their assigned chaos protocols. Instead of maintaining orderly battle lines like every other species the Void Hunters had encountered, the human ships attacked like a swarm of angry insects, never remaining in one position long enough for the enemy to coordinate effective countermeasures. The Void Hunters' response was immediate and devastating. Beams of coherent energy that seemed to tear reality itself lanced out from their ships, striking human vessels with enough power to vaporize small asteroids. The aliens' targeting systems were impossibly precise, and their coordination was perfect. Exactly what humanity had hoped for. Dr. Vasquez's kinetic weapons revealed their true purpose in the first exchange. While the Void Hunter's defensive systems effortlessly deflected or absorbed the energy weapons that other species relied upon, they were completely unprepared for simple kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The dense metal spheres punched through their hulls like bullets through tissue paper, each impact releasing devastating amounts of kinetic energy. "Direct hit on enemy formation leader," reported the weapons officer as one of the larger Void Hunter ships broke apart in a cascade of secondary explosions. Their defensive systems aren't registering our projectiles as weapons until impact, but the Void Hunters learned quickly. Within minutes of the first kinetic impacts, their formation began adapting to counter the unexpected threat. Point defense systems that had been optimized for energy weapons started targeting the incoming projectiles, and their ships began employing evasive maneuvers that seemed to bend space around them. The battle quickly devolved into exactly the kind of chaotic melee that human tactics were designed to exploit. Individual ship captains broke off from coordinated formations to pursue targets of opportunity, creating a three-dimensional maze of hunter and hunted that stretched across thousands of cubic kilometers of space. Captain Sarah Mitchell, commanding the destroyer Retribution, found herself pursuing a damaged Void Hunter vessel through the nebula's gas clouds. Her ship's hull was scarred and blackened from multiple energy hits, but her crew's determination burned brighter than the dying stars around them. "Target acquired," her weapons officer announced. "Range decreasing to optimal kinetic bombardment distance." "Fire everything we have," Mitchell commanded. "Let's show these machines what humans do to bullies." 6 planet cracker projectiles launched simultaneously from the Retribution's modified cargo bays. The Void Hunter ship attempted evasive maneuvers that defied physics, but the kinetic weapons tracked their target with inexorable precision. 4 impacts struck within milliseconds of each other, and the alien vessel simply ceased to exist in a brilliant flash of converted matter. Across the battlefield, similar engagements were playing out as human ingenuity clashed with mechanical perfection. The cost was horrific. Human ships were being destroyed faster than their crews could process, and thousands of Earth's finest were dying with each passing minute. But their sacrifice was creating the one thing the mission required: chaos and confusion in the Void Hunter formation. Admiral Torres watched the tactical display as gaps began appearing in the enemy's perfect geometrical arrangement. "Signal the Kythera refugee fleet," he commanded. "Escape corridor opening in Sector 7. They have approximately 6 minutes before we lose cohesion." The Kythera response was immediate and heartbreaking. Elder Morvain's mental voice reached across the communication arrays filled with gratitude and anguish. "Humanity remembers its debts. Your people die for strangers, and we will carry this sacrifice in our memories forever. The galaxy will know what you have done here." As the surviving Kythera ships began their desperate flight toward safety, Torres made the hardest decision of his military career. "All remaining vessels, implement Protocol Omega. Cover the refugee evacuation, regardless of cost." Protocol Omega was humanity's final tactical doctrine, a deliberate sacrifice of military assets to achieve strategic objectives. Ships that had already suffered critical damage turned toward the largest Void Hunter vessels in suicidal attack runs, their crews determined to inflict maximum casualties even as their own hulls broke apart under enemy fire. The destroyer Courage rammed a Void Hunter dreadnought at full velocity, both ships disappearing in a nova-bright explosion that briefly outshone nearby stars. The cruiser Determination held position against impossible odds, her crew continuing to fire kinetic weapons even as energy beams systematically dismantled their ship around them. When the battle finally ended, over 400 human ships had been destroyed, and 23,000 crew members had paid the ultimate price for humanity's honor. But the Kythera refugee fleet had escaped to safety, carrying the last survivors of their ancient civilization to distant stars where they could rebuild their culture and preserve their accumulated knowledge. Admiral Torres, his own flagship badly damaged and limping toward the rally point, received a final transmission from Elder Morvain as the Kythera ships disappeared into folded space. The debt is repaid, Marcus Torres of humanity. But more than that, you have shown this galaxy that there are still species willing to sacrifice everything for what is morally right. The Kythera will remember this day, and so will others who witness what humanity has accomplished here. 6 months later, as Torres stood before the Earth Defense Council delivering his after-action report, the full implications of the Battle of Helix Nebula were becoming clear. Intelligence indicated that 17 different alien civilizations had reached out to Earth, seeking defensive alliances. The galaxy had taken notice of humanity's commitment to protecting innocent life from extinction. But perhaps more importantly, the Void Hunters had withdrawn from known space, apparently reconsidering their campaign of extermination in light of encountering a species that fought with such unpredictable ferocity. Humanity had not only saved the Kythera, but had struck a blow for all organic life in the galaxy. The cost had been enormous, but as Torres looked out at the memorials being erected for the fallen, he knew with absolute certainty that those brave souls would have considered their sacrifice worthwhile. They had died to prove that humanity keeps its promises, protects the innocent, and stands ready to fight impossible odds for what is right. The galaxy was indeed a dangerous place, filled with mechanical perfection and ancient terrors. But it had also become a place where the innocent could call for help and know that someone would answer, where promises made in kindness would be honored in blood and fire, and where no benevolent species would ever again face extinction alone. Humanity had kept its word, and in doing so, had announced to the cosmos that Earth's children were protectors of life itself, guardians willing to stand against the darkness no matter the cost. The debt was settled, but the legend would endure forever among the stars.